welcome. I'm delighted to see everybody coming out on this hot summer day. I'm Dr. David Martin, the president for quite a while of the Friends of Monmouth Battlefield. We are a volunteer group that supports the park. We did the reenactment in June. We had over 12,000 people here over the two-day weekend. It's on Father's Day weekend again next year. Yep. In 2 years, I just spent a long planning session already with the head of the park about what we're going to do in 2028 to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the battle. It would be a big show. We also help interpret the Craig House, which is a 1750, if I talk too fast or too low, let me know, which is a 1750s farmhouse over on Route 90 at Shivanoff Road. It's open Sundays 1 to 4, and we provide the interpreters for that because the park only has like 3 full-time people and 6 seasonals, and they can't get done everything that needs doing. That's why we're glad to help them. What I'm talking about today is New Jersey troops at the battle. Now, what this is a combination of 2 lectures I've given in the past, one on the New Jersey regular troops and one on the New Jersey militia troops. And the militia then is a lot like the National Guard today. But what I've done is to combine the 2 talks, which will enable me to be a little more concise, but also to do my favorite thing that teachers like to give on essays, compare and contrast. And I see you smiling because you probably remember that from your high school days. So I'm going to talk first about the New Jersey regular troops. These are Continental Line trained troops. They're also known as the Jersey Line or the Jersey Blues. The Jersey Brigade was first set up by the call in 1776. New Jersey was asked by Congress to raise 4 regiments, and a regiment will be in battle 1 to 300. Civil War regiments started out with 1,000. But the average, by the time they got to Gettysburg, they were down to 300 due to attrition, assigned extra tasks, sick and whatever. But we had 4 regiments, sometimes called battalions, of regular troops, though the 4th regiment never did get up to full strength. The problem was they only enlisted for 1 year. And they had this trouble also in the Civil War. I'll be doing a lot of comparisons on that because I've done studies of that also. They thought the Civil War would be over in 3 months. And they all went down the first Bull Run, and we lost, and the troops went home. So they had to re-enlist them for 3 years. And when they had trouble in 1862 enlisting them for 3 years, they enlisted them for 9 months. In the Revolution, they would take you for a year. We'll see how that differs when we look at the militia. Okay, the original soldiers from the first establishment were offered a bounty of $20 to sign up. You get a portion when you sign up, and the rest goes when you leave or to your widow or wife. They also got a partial land grant. You were permitted 1 suit of clothing. Okay, you had to, in militia, you supply your own musket and gun. In the Continental Line, they supply. You get 1 suit of clothing. Clearly, that's not going to last, and you'd have to buy extra on your own. Pay was $5 a month. Doesn't sound a lot now. I don't know what the working wage was in Rev War times. I know in the Civil War, working wage was $8 to $10 a month. So the average income of a working man in Civil War era is a little over $100. And clearly, keep track of inflation. I know when I was young, you would get a McDonald's hamburger for 15 cents, get a full meal for 50 cents. No mas. Okay, so the Jersey Regular Brigade, again, has 4 regiments, and they need to be re-enlisted every year. The leader, and the subtitle of the talk is Leaders of these units, is Colonel William Maxwell, known as Scotch Willie. He's born actually in Ireland, but I think Northern Ireland. He was 43 at the time of the battle. Came to America with his family in 1747 and lived up in Phillipsburg in Sussex County in North Jersey. The story of the brigade is pretty much his story because he was their commander for most of the war. At the Battle of Brandywine, which is the major battle in which we lost control of Philadelphia in 1777. The unit fought okay, but he was brought up on charges by his friends that didn't like him. That's a contradiction there. Of being drunk at the battle. It's not unusual for the troops to have liquor, and if you won a battle, you would often get some liquor as a reward, or if you lost, you'd find some liquor to drown your sorrows. He was brought up on charges of drinking during the battle. Okay, so we left Scottsville was on trial, and a court of inquiry found that the charges were without foundation. He was dismissed. The charges were not him. Congress then voted, quote, 30 hogshead. I don't know quite what a hogshead is. I think it's a small barrel. 30 hogshead of rum to be given to the army in honor of their gallant behavior. Neither Maxwell nor his men were blamed for the failure in the battle. This is kind of like when President Lincoln appointed U.S. Grant commander of all the Union armies in 1864. And his detractors and Grant's detractors said he was a drunkard. Whereupon Lincoln said, I like this man, he fights. Tell me what brand of whiskey he drinks, and I'll give it to all my generals. So, in the campaign in 1778 that led up to Monmouth, which is June 28, 1778, the New Jersey Brigade was important because a lot of the troops knew the ground. And Maxwell was assigned to harass the British troops, which he did, especially down at Mount Holly. There was a skirmish of some sort before the battle. On the 24th of June, 4 days before the battle, Washington directed Maxwell to keep up a constant correspondence as the movements of the army must be governed by the intelligence received from yourself and from General Dickinson. General Dickinson was in charge of the militia. We'll talk about their role in the battle shortly. So in the campaign leading up to Monmouth, he did a good job keeping track of where the British were, slowing them down. They would burn bridges, chop down trees to block the roads, and tell George Washington where the British were. British, by the way, had crossed over at Camden from Philadelphia. Just a little background, some of you may not be aware of that. The British had captured Philadelphia in 1777. By European standards, the war should have been over. In Europe, if you capture the enemy capital, the other side should give up. Napoleon captures Berlin, end of war. The British, the Allies capture Paris, should be the end of the war, except when you send Napoleon to Elba and he comes back, and then you have to defeat him again at Waterloo. When the British captured Philadelphia, we were too dumb to realize we were defeated, and Congress packed up and moved to York, Pennsylvania. Congress was not in Philadelphia the whole war. They're going to be in Princeton for a while. Washington stayed up at Rocky Hill. Anyway, so the British, because they had lost an army at Saratoga, decided for that year to give up Philadelphia without a fight. Yay! And they marched essentially up the turnpike, which wasn't there, up towards New Brunswick, and Maxwell was with the troops that were following them. On the morning of the battle, his troops will be with the main army, which is over near Englishtown, and we're going to be looking at, I guess partly at the map, the lighter map, the smaller map that doesn't have the colors on it. It's a little complicated here on the early part of the battle, but what will happen is this is actually to show where the militia troops were. Route 522, we call it Battlefield Road, goes right down the middle of the map, left to right. And Maxwell's brigade will be involved in those troops movements, and they're going to win the early part of the battle. And by the way, Monmouth is on June 28, 1778, the longest single day's battle of the war, from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. Usually battles are short. Princeton lasted maybe 20 minutes or an hour if you include the last attack on Nassau Hall. Trenton was 30 minutes, and then the battles are over because there's not a lot of troops. There'll be 10,000 or so on the side here, and the muskets don't shoot very far, 50 to 70 yards. The cannons don't shoot more than half a mile. It's more a game. I used to say like checkers, but maybe something like chess. You move, I move, you move, I move, king me, you lose, go away. they're usually decided quickly, except for the sieges that they had in Boston in 1775 and at Yorktown in 1781. So when the troops they were in General Charles Lee, which is another story, Washington's second in command. He got court-martialed after the battle. Maxwell's troops will be, it's not shown on this map, on the right side of the map in a reserve position during the maneuvers late that morning when Lee's attack fell apart. And now this is more not directly related to Jersey troops, but explain Maxwell's line of thought. General Lee had about 4,000 troops. The British had like 1,200 in their rear guard, and Lee should have just jumped on them, even though Americans are not known to be good attackers. We defend a lot better than we attack. But Lee decided to have a left hook go around, then the right hook under Lafayette, and some reserve troops in the back under Colonel Morgan, who, by the way, had all the rifled muskets. Regular muskets, I mentioned, shoot 50 yards. Rifled muskets, like Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett have, can hit a squirrel at 150 yards. This attack fell apart, partly because General Lee sent the orders to Morgan, saying, in the morning, attack the British rear. Colonel Morgan got the order around 6 in the morning on the 28th and thought that Lee meant the 29th because the orders weren't time-stamped, and he sat there. So the attack on the British rear didn't happen. The attack on the British southern flank, Lafayette had 4 regiments. He's like 21 years old and full of vim and vigor. And when he went to make the attack, he only had 1 regiment with him because he outpaced the other ones. That didn't work. The left-wing attack didn't work. And when things started falling apart, General Maxwell's in the back line and says, things aren't going right. And one of the brigades he couldn't see because Scott's men, it was hot, so they went into the woods to get cool. And it looked like the whole American center was empty. So the right wing wasn't doing well, the left wing wasn't doing well. Maxwell had a chat with General Matt Anthony Wayne, and they decided to pull back, which they did. And this is what General Lee was court-martialed for, that he did not have a battle plan and did not have control of his troops. So in the Jersey Brigade, what I'm saying is, bless you, dog, involved in the morning fighting but didn't do anything. And this will be a theme of them in the battle. This is Colonel Oswald, who's a cannon commander during that fight. Later, I discovered on my left Maxwell's brigade and General Scott's detachment coming out of the woods. I had formed for action, had taken 2 guns, and 2 from Scott's unit and 2 from Maxwell's, making in all I had 10. I heard someone behind me ask my officers what we were doing and why we did not retreat then. I turned my horse about and saw it was Maxwell. I told him I had my orders, and he rode off with his men. Not much initiative. I was doing some more reading on the new issue of Gettysburg magazine, but General Lee, with his forces, because Confederates usually had less troops than Union troops, depended on his subordinates taking initiative in critical situations. Usually that worked, although at Chancellorsville, when General Jackson, Stonewall Jackson took initiative, he ended up getting himself shot to death. But Lee will depend on, or General Lee, Robert E. Lee in the Civil War depended on that. Unfortunately, most of our subordinate commanders in the Revolution weren't A-plus leaders, and I'll just leave it at that. That may be a good talk for another topic. So he's going to start pulling back, basically without orders, and we'll get some orders in a minute. Many years after the war, one of the privates in the 1st New Jersey Regiment named John Ackerman recalled the withdrawal in his pension papers. Now what's neat is some troops, in order to collect the pensions that were being given out after the war, and the pay records that weren't always clear, had to get an affidavit to write out what they saw in the war and get their commander or somebody else in the unit to sign it. And it's a great trove of information for Monmouth and other battles, and these papers are not all researched yet. So there's still information coming out. Now this private said that his regiment on that day was ordered by their colonel to retreat, which was caused by moving back, in which I lost my shoes. Okay, I bet it must not have been in short, in good shape. After retreating across the stream, my regiment came to the road just as the troops under the immediate command of Washington were coming up. Washington halted us. and he well recollected that General Washington asked the troops if they could fight, and we answered with rousing cheers. Yay! Okay, so if we look at the colored side of the map, this is pretty much that description that I just said. You will see in the upper left corner, sort of, 1st New Jersey. That's actually going to be, from just a bare moment, the whole of Maxwell's brigade. Washington came up, and he was not on the battlefield for the first half of the battle, first third of the battle. He will show up around noon, and he will meet General Lee over on the right side of the map, and ask General Lee, "Sir, what is all this confusion?" And they had an argument, and Washington will fire Lee on the spot, and then hires him back. And there's a fight going on what's called the Point of Woods. They're not directly related to us, but the New Jersey Brigade was asked to form on the left side of the map. That road that's going through there is Route 522, which is still there, between Route 522 and the Spotswood Middle Brook. This is a testimony of one of the regiment commanders. The brigade was moving up from the courthouse. I rode up to General Maxwell and asked him where the brigade should form. He said he had no orders. By this time, we had crossed the Middle Brook that was between the enemy's encampment and ours. I saw no disposition to face the enemy, but we withdrew. I begged of General Maxwell to let me halt my regiment. He finally consented, drew them up on the left of the hedgerow. Now, the hedgerow was on the bottom left corner of the map. This is the center of the battlefield and of the battlefield park, which is now about 2,000 acres. And I will pause to let you know that we've been fighting for 2 years a warehouse to be built across the street from the entrance to the park. I gave testimony at the hearings. The state just bought it. 22 acres, $15 million. But we're preventing a warehouse from being built directly across the entrance to the park. And I'll have that. There's a press release out from DEP, and it'll be in the next month's newsletter. We are still fighting another warehouse next door to it. And I was at the hearings last month. I'll go to the one in September. It's sick that they're building warehouses and then leaving them empty. And to build something like that on the 2-lane Route 33 right there with these big trucks coming in and not stopping at the stop signs. Anyway, I'm preaching from the pulpit on them, but we're working on blocking the second one. I'm not as optimistic on this one, but we'll see what happens. So the hedgerow, anyway, is the middle of the battlefield. It changed hands 7 times during the course of the battle, and that's where often our walking tours will be going out there. And the hedgerow line is clearly marked where you see that arrow Livingston with the blue arrow. There's a couple markers there because this position will be attacked by the best troops in the British Army, the Guards and the Grenadiers. The New Jersey Brigade's job was to hold the left end of that line, as I said, between Route 522 and Spotswood Middle Brook. And there is some reconstructed fencing there where they were put. Colonel Ogden says that his brigade was drawn up on the left of the hedgerow in a piece of wood, expecting to have the opportunity of covering the men retreating. After I had been there 6 or 8 minutes, a major came up to me and asked me if he could be of service. I told him to reconnoiter where the enemy was. I felt that as long as my right flank was secure, which is where the main line is, or it says hedgerow, I apprehended no danger from that direction. And a short time after, there was lots of firing on my front, on the right, then on my front, and I was concerned about on the left, because if any British troops get to the left of him, he's going to be in trouble. 6 to 8 minutes. The brigade, New Jersey Brigade, had in it 4 regiments, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 2nd Regiment was ordered to withdraw back to Pine Hill, which is where Molly Pitcher was. The 3rd and 4th Regiments just disappeared, much as they had done in the morning. I don't know if this is lack of good commanders. I think it's lack of good direction. My secret feeling is that when they saw the 2nd Regiment pull out, they said, oh, we must have missed some order, and they left also. What this means is that there's only one regiment of the 4, the 1st, holding that line. And they were there 6 to 8 minutes.
Wow.
When they withdrew, because this big British attack, one of the British units is actually going to come right down 522, they fired their loaded muskets and left. We'll say this is shameful. I'll just leave it at not good. Is that fair enough? They will withdraw back to the main American position where they're put, not in the main line, not even in the 2nd line, but in the 3rd line. Eventually, the 3rd and 4th regiments showed up, and they're going to be over by Tennant Church. Meaning that in this whole battle, one regiment fired shots for a few minutes out of the New Jersey Brigade. And that's what happened. I'm here to explain what happened, not to glorify them, not to justify them. Being in the heat of battle without a lot of good direction. They didn't get good direction from Charles Lee in the morning. They didn't get real good direction other than they were asked to hold the northern end of that line, by the way, which they didn't do, which caused the collapse of the whole hedgerow line. And they'll be on the field in the back. I just want to read a couple soldier quotes. When you're writing histories of battles, if you've read my book on July 1 at Gettysburg, there's like 1,200 footnotes to it, because the more footnotes and original sources you can put in, the better you can try to figure out what's going on. A soldier from the 2nd New Jersey Regiment, age 19, says in his pension application, I entered the service of June of 1778 and marched through Princeton and Mount Holly. He joined the Army of June. There he marched to Monmouth where the battle was fought. I was not in the action. New Jersey troops had orders to retire back to Englishtown, where he marched later in the morning. Doesn't mention fighting at all. He's in the 2nd Regiment. A fellow in the 1st New Jersey, I was in Maxwell's command when Washington's army came up, and I fought a great battle at Monmouth. It was hot. Okay? It's kind of like I have a diary from a fellow in the 12th New Jersey at Gettysburg. A bunch of rebels came out of the woods yesterday. It was a hot fight in the afternoon, and then they fell back. That's picked charge. Okay, when you're a soldier in the ranks, you do not have scope to see everything that's going on. Nathaniel Lyon said, I was engaged in a battle about a mile from Monmouth Courthouse. General Maxwell's brigade was not much exposed during the fighting. Fair. The night of the battle, I was detached to help bury the dead. And the next morning, I went to Princeton in charge of the sick. We remained in Princeton about a week and then went to join his company at Elizabeth. No fighting, I'm sorry. Okay, so that is the saga of the 1st New Jersey Brigade, or the New Jersey Brigade of Continental Regulars, regular troops at Monmouth. Now, their casualties, before Monmouth, they had 5 wounded, 1 missing, 9 captured, 2 killed, 1 missing, 18 men out of maybe 400. At the battle, 7 or 8 wounded, 4 missing, 1 died of heat exhaustion. Total 13. Doesn't say anybody killed. So, not a glorious record. Now, the brigade did stay in line in the Army. Up at Morristown, they were part of the revolt. If you go up to Morristown, you can see when the troops went on strike, led by Connecticut troops, then New Jersey, because they weren't being paid. And some of the troops were going to march on Princeton, which is where Congress was at the time. That's beyond the scope of what's going on. Just want to talk about General Maxwell. He was a decent general, not a first-rate, but not a lousy one, just a decent general. But he needs, like many good generals, command, and you certainly don't want to be promoted above your ability level. Let's call it the Peter Principle or something. Yeah. In 1780, 2 years after Monmouth, he resigned because everybody else that had been a brigadier general as long as him had been promoted or given commands and he wasn't. And he got mad and quit. Now, generals can do that. Regular troops can't. They have to go to enlistment. He said, I find that my command is disagreeable where I am serving. Maybe he didn't want to serve under the general he was assigned to, or he's mad he wasn't promoted to major general. And he wrote on July 20, 1780, I have not found my command of the New Jersey Brigade there for some time as agreeable as I would wish it to be. 3 days later, he retracted his resignation. But General Washington said, sorry, I already sent it to Congress, bye. And Congress accepted his resignation on July 25th, gone from the Army. Now, he did not abandon the American cause. He goes home to his farm in North Jersey, and in 1783 got elected to the state assembly from Sussex County, and will serve the rest of the Revolutionary period as a congressman. And he did do duty by being a general for 4 years during the war. He died in 1796 after a brief illness and is buried in Stewartsville, never married. Now, what's interesting with him is I have what he wanted inscribed on his tombstone. Okay, this is Scott Willie Maxwell, the best and longest serving of the commanders of the New Jersey Brigade. Excuse me. Beneath this marble lies the body of Brigadier General William Maxwell, eldest son of John and Ann Maxwell of the Township of Greenwich, County of Sussex, State of New Jersey, who departed this life on the 4th of November in the year of our Lord, 1796, in the 63rd year of his age. In the Revolutionary War, which established the independence of the United States, he took an early and active part. A distinguished military partisan, he arose through different grades of the American Army to the rank of Brigadier General. A genuine patriot, he was a firm and decided friend to the Constitution and the government of his country. In private life, he was equally devoted to its service and to the good of the community of which he was a member. An honorable and charitable man, a warm and affectionate friend, a zealous advocate of the institutions, an active promoter of the interests of the Christian religion. Decent. Okay. So maybe a name you haven't even heard of before, Scott Willie Maxwell, best known for not being drunk before Philadelphia and for leading the Jersey Brigade for much of the war. Okay, now for part two, refresh myself here. It was advertised the puppy dog got bored and went to sleep already. Militia. Now, militia's like the National Guard. Militia is, I think the enrolled militia is all men between 18 and 40. And what would happen with the militia, and I get ahead of myself at the 16 and 50 at this time, is that you'd have to be enlisted, and if you got called up, you'd have to come with your own musket and weapons. You could be exempted for poor health or religious reasons or your public service, but you could not be exempted for previous military service. If you don't show up when your regiment is called, when your name comes out, literally, your unit does, you could be fined or you could send a substitute. Now, in Civil War days, they had substitutes when they had the draft. You could pay somebody else to go in your place, or you could just pay $300 and not go at all. In Revolution, you could provide a substitute. In there's cases I know of a farmer that had 3 or 4 sons, and every time the farmer got called up, he'd send his youngest son. And if your oldest son got called up, you send the youngest son. So the youngest son spends most of the war serving in the Army, good experience, and the rest of the family didn't have to go because they followed the rules. They would often, they had to provide their own arms and equipment, so often the family would just have 1 or 2 muskets and sets of accoutrements, so whoever got called up would have something to take with them. No uniforms, not the nice buff and blue ones that you'll see in the Continental Line. What's the kicker with the militia is that you're only called up for 1 month or the duration of the crisis. So what happened was when the British left Camden, or left Philadelphia to Camden in the second week of June and started marching through New Jersey, the state assembly calls up militia for a month because the British are invading our state again. And they will, we can follow them through their movements, and we don't have time to cover the actual campaign. But the number of militia was around 2,000 by the end of the campaign. And the counties that were called up were from Burlington, Cumberland, Middlesex, Monmouth, that makes sense, Salem, okay, Somerset, okay, Morris, that's north, Essex, that's Newark. They're essentially calling up all the militia they can. Now, what's interesting is, and we'll get to it in a moment, but if you look at the smaller map, it's not so colorful, and start reading the assignments, you will see where the militia was on the morning of the battle. Up at the top is the Somerset militia, middle left is the Hunterdon militia, just below that's the Burlington militia, and there will be others stationed around the battle area. Interestingly, I was working at the gift shop one day years ago, and a fellow comes in with a diary of his ancestor that was at the Battle of Monmouth. I said, cool, what was his unit? And he told me the Essex County Militia. I said, wait a minute, that's Newark. I don't think they were here. And I did research on it and provided help to the historian doing this map. And my gosh, the Newark Essex County Militia was here. I didn't know that. So there's still stuff to be learned. In general, militia has not been known to be real reliable. Okay, they don't really want to be there. They're not as well trained. They're not as well equipped. They usually don't even know their upper officers. You know your captain from your own company, but you won't know anybody beyond that. And in general, the militia did not behave well, although the Battle of Bunker Hill was fought by a good American militia until we ran out of ammunition. Now, this is Bunker Hill, as you all know, was fought at the wrong place. It should have been Breed's Hill for the marker, but Bunker Hill was a better place to put the monument up, so we call it Bunker Hill. So the militia can be not reliable. Is that a paradox? Okay. Washington usually didn't trust it. Now, what happened during the campaign, remember the British crossed at Camden, they're coming up the turnpike. The militia is out down there, and what are they doing? Burning bridges, chopping down trees, keeping track of where the British Army is. If any British soldier, especially an officer, stops to go in the woods to relieve himself of bodily function, catch him with his pants down, take him prisoner. They were harassing the British, like mosquitoes. By the way, the British hated New Jersey because it was hot, it was humid, the roads are made of sand, and they didn't like the New Jersey state bird, the mosquito. Militia did not fight well as a unit, but during the campaign, they were excellent at hanging out in the woods. It's like the Minutemen were militia. They weren't good at fighting as a unit, but they're great at hiding behind stone walls and picking off those British in their red coats marching down the road to Boston. So during the approach to Monmouth, the British had to rebuild 5 bridges, take down all the trees on the roads, and generally deal with those mosquitoes. Now, we just made it annoying for them. We maybe slowed down the advance a little bit. But what's important was the General Dickinson, who was in charge of the militia, again, numbered 2,000 by the time of the battle, had an excellent reporting system and gave daily, or even more than that, reports to General Washington where the British were, how fast they're going. The British actually divided up into 2 detachments because there were too many men to put on one road. Their wagon train of stuff, of supplies and stuff they stole from Philadelphia and local farmers was 10 miles long. And we would love to go grab some of that every time we got. Militia was doing what militia was good at, harassing the enemy. Okay, we'll see what happens when they get to the battlefield. The day of the battle, or actually the night before the battle, the headquarters, by the way, for the militia, I found out, was over at Old Tennant Church, which was about a mile and a half that way. And there were militia detachments far and wide to see where the British were. The British that night, before the battle, this is the night of June 27th, were in 3 camps. One, the southern camp down by the hospital, by the Freehold Hospital. The main camp at Covenhoven, where the British general headquarters was under General Clinton, and there were a few troops on the north side of town near Lake Toplanemus. By the way, Freehold then was only about 50 houses and 4 churches. I'm not going to count the bars. And I'm working with the former mayor of Freehold, Nolan Higgins, on putting up some markers in town. If we can't get markers up where the 3 British campsites were, we'll put a main marker in what they call Veterans Park, the other side of the courthouse. There's already a, I don't know if it's World War I or World II howitzer in there, but it's already a military park. And that area did figure in the battle itself, but I'm working on expanding that out to show the British campsites in town. So they have about a 2-mile frontage, and the militia are around their edges. The night before the battle, there was a skirmish up by Lake Toponimus. Toponimus, if you live locally up on the north side of Freehold, then known as Monmouth Courthouse. And these militia troops are reporting back to General Dickinson, who's at Tennant Church, and he's reporting to Washington, who's back the other side of Englishtown on Gravel Hill and Monroe Township. So militia are doing pretty good, okay, because they haven't been on the field yet. Now, the morning of the battle, the militia was with the 1st American advance. General Lee will be advancing. This is the smaller map. Down Route 522. He stops every 50 yards, fearful that British were in the woods. You think British are in the woods? Send some scouts, i.e. the militia, out there and see if they're there. So as that map again shows, as I pointed out earlier, that the Somerset militia is on the north, the 1st and 2nd regiments under Colonel Frelinghuysen. The center has the 1st, 3rd, and 4th Hunterton militias, and on the south side is the Burlington militia. There are also units back at the Meeting House as a reserve, the 3rd Hunterton, and there are some assorted militia with Colonel Morgan, who is down at the Burger King on Route 9 south of town. Sandy thinks I know where the site of every McDonald's and Burger King in the state is. Most of them, I don't know North Virginia. It comes handy to know, especially when you have stock in McDonald's. Anyway, I digress. I tell stories. So the militia was on the field early in the morning, still scouting and doing their job and fighting the British in the first action. Okay. As the battle developed, some militia were sent forward to scout where the British were, and they will be in the battle till around 9 in the morning when the regular troops were on the field. And they did credibly, because it was an open fight. There was just a small British reserve line, or holding action there at the hedgerow, but they're doing what militia can do. After the battle, the British retreated, let's say that. The night of the battle, they went back to camps along Route 9, left their campfires burning, and marched off to Colts Neck during the night. Cowards that they are, and would not continue the battle. Washington did this several times during the war and got away with it. Washington had his troops on the field ready to fight another day. When he found the British were gone, he marched up towards New Brunswick, where he'll be on July 4th, as the British hoofed it pretty good up to what they call the Heights of Middletown, on the other side of Nut Swamp, which is pretty swampy up that way. And they're on their way to Sandy Hook, which then was actually an island. There'd been a hurricane and Sandy Hook got cut off and it was an island, so they could go back to Staten Island in New York. Washington wanted to see where they were, but wasn't going to send his whole army after them because they were tired. So who does he send to follow the British? But Maxwell and the 1st New Jersey Regulars and the militia. And Maxwell followed them for a while, and the militia followed the British wagons all the way up to Colts Neck. But he followed them for a little bit farther and decided, it's too hot. And that was the end of the campaign. And he withdrew back to New Brunswick. So the militia, I'll give them, a B+. They did good stuff in the campaign. Maybe B+. Did what was asked of them at the battle. They're misused by Morgan, by Maxwell and Morgan afterwards. and just withdrew. So the moral of all this, before I get into individual commanders, is Jersey Brigade, C minus. I'm a school teacher, I have grades. Jersey Brigade, maybe C minus. Militia, B plus. One historian says the run-up to Monmouth offered one of the best examples of militia and Continentals working in unison, because they gathered evidence and got it to the commander. Okay, so that's comparing and contrasting. Okay, militia's in for 30 days. Troops are in for 1 year. Troops have pretty uniforms. Militia don't. Troops get supplied weapons. Militia brings their own. Troops have a commander named Scott's Willie, and the militia, General Dickinson, did a lot better than Scott's Willie. Now, a couple add-ons, and then we'll talk about leadership. In 1828, what's important about 1828? 50th anniversary of the battle. Yep. They did a reenactment of sorts, and they had 130 New Jersey militia here. In 1854, they had 2,000 militia here to recreate the battle as they commemorate what was going on. Because several of them collapsed in the heat, the event got canceled. Okay. Just a little add-on. It's interesting to look at what they were doing to commemorate, and a lot of what we remember about the Revolution didn't happen until 1876, the centennial of the Revolution. That's when you get a lot of the Molly Pitcher stories put together, and even the Betsy Ross stories. Now, don't get me going on Molly Pitcher. I've written a book on it. I give a whole lecture on it. Betsy Ross made flags, but they were for boats, and they didn't carry no 13-star flags like we call the Betsy Ross flag when they're in the war. This was set up by her nephew or somebody. In 1878, when we're looking for heroes and heroines, that's when you get the Betsy Ross and Molly Pitcher stories all over the place, exaggerated from what had happened already 100 years before. Now, the last segment, I want to talk briefly about leadership. I talked about Scott's Willie, I talked about General Dickinson. But we had a definite home field advantage here because it's in New Jersey, and several of the officers in the militia units lived here. And during the course of the battle, they will give advice to Washington and his staff, who actually listen to them on how to run the battle, part of which will affect this ground that we're on right now. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Henderson was the first to tell Washington that Lee wasn't doing well and was retreating. One of Washington's staff called Henderson a countryman. Well, he's just a local farmer in the Army. He was the lieutenant colonel in the Monmouth militia, a respected doctor. The British had pillaged and burned his house 2 days before the battle. And he actually talked to Washington and showed him the right road to come on, which is Route 522 to get to the British. Colonel David Foreman was a former militia general, but resigned before Monmouth, but he was serving as a volunteer on General Lee's staff, and probably related to the Foremans that ran Foreman's Mill. It's not there anymore, but it's what formed Lake Topkanemus on the north side of town. When Charles Lee was supposed to advance toward the British before dawn, 4 a.m. on the day of the battle, but waited because the guides that Washington promised didn't show up yet. And they got off to an hour late start, and they only got off to an hour start because Foreman showed up, a local farmer officer, lived in the area, knew the area, and helped the Army get moving by 6 a.m. That was just luck. Okay. He offered to lead troops later in the day or during the retreat, and Lee refused to listen to him. That's part of Lee's problem. He's going to get fired. Okay. Peter Wyckoff, local farmer, rode up to General Lee at a critical moment during the retreat, saying he was perfectly acquainted with this country. Lee asked him about any defensible terrain, and he pointed out to Lee, this is up on Route 522, which is half a mile north of here, pointed out this hill. Problem was there was no direct path to get here. So he also suggested Perrine Hill, which is the hill between the battlefield and Lieutenant Church, which is where Washington will actually be there. And Lee sent Wyckoff back to help form the troops. It may have been Wyckoff that led off those New Jersey regular regiments that disappeared, but he gave Lee good advice on what to do. The most useful one was Lieutenant Colonel David Ray of the 2nd New Jersey. He's the 3rd generation of Rays to live on the battlefield. We have one of the few surviving houses over on Wemrock Road is the Ray Mansion. In the morning, he guided General Wayne's forces into the battle. At 1 p.m., he was at the hedgerow line with that one regiment that stayed. About 2 o'clock, he told Washington, whom he recognized, of the importance of this hill, Combs's Hill. And Washington listened to him and sent troops to occupy this hill. Because the British, what they want to do, they learned at Bunker Hill, you can't attack the Americans head on. They'll stay in shooting. It took like 7 charges to carry Bunker Hill. By far the most battle casualties in any fight by the British were at Bunker Hill. They won't attack us head on anymore. What they will do at Long Island or at Brandywine, line up some cannons, get Washington's attention, and send half your army behind them. And it worked at Long Island. It'll work at Brandywine. They want to do it here. So Clinton's getting some troops together to come and take this hill. Because we had the home field advantage, and then Lieutenant Colonel Ray told Washington about this, we got to this hill before the British did. And we put 4 cannons and 800 troops on the edge of this hill. There's markers outside this visitor center. And there was such a strong force, the British never did attack this. They also tried later to move around the American north flank, but they were stopped because Washington anticipated them, and that's when they started to withdraw and eventually went away. So, David Ray was called by Dr. Gary Stone, the former historian here, in his book Fatal Sunday, indefatigable, which is a big word. Probably saw more of the battlefield on 2/28 than anybody else, because he involved at several stages of the battle, giving good advice to look to the commanders. The commanders listened to him, although Charles Lee once. So, summation. The militia officers that I just talked about the last few minutes did more in the battle than either Maxwell's brigade or the militia units on the battle by helping guide the troops and the generals where they could be or where they should be at just the right times. That's why I call it a home field advantage that the British didn't have. And that helped us to emerge with a draw here at the battle. And what's interesting is, and if you've heard my talks before, that it is technically a draw in every sense of the word. Nobody really won, but nobody really lost. Washington had the choice at 1 o'clock to withdraw from the battlefield and have just another loss. His record as a field commander was 4 wins, 8 losses, 1 tie. Monmouth is the tie. The 4 wins are the sieges at Boston in 1775 and Yorktown in 1781. The other 2 wins are what I call the sneak attacks at Trenton and Princeton. Okay, 8 losses, I don't need to enumerate them all. If he had been 4-9, he might have been fired. And the battle, though he didn't lose, we put up a very good fight. Now, it's partly due to, well, mostly due to his decision to stay on the field, but as he approached the battlefield coming in from Englishtown, because as I mentioned, he was not present on the field for the morning part of the battle, his job was to bring the troops up. And he was having brunch at the home of James English, Dr. James English in Englishtown. Englishtown is not named Englishtown because it's founded by Englishmen, like Germantown in Pennsylvania was founded by Germans. That makes sense. There's 2 brothers, Scottish brothers named English, that's strange, that founded Englishtown. And Washington's there having brunch during the morning of the battle till he starts hearing it may not be going well. He actually sent a letter to Congress that morning. General Lee reports the British were in retreat. Well, they were, except an hour later, Lee was in retreat. And he rode onto the battlefield. He could have left the field at noon, but he rode over Perrine Hill, which is the hill just side of Tennant Church, and saw it was a strong position. Now, I keep likening it to my Civil War experience. The Union Army on July 1 got badly defeated, but on the morning of the battle, they crossed over a big hill called Cemetery Hill to fight on the other side of Gettysburg. When they lost, they knew that Cemetery Hill was there and they withdrew to it. So Washington knew coming into the battlefield there was a big hill there. That was a poor position, and it was. So that at 12:30 at 1, he made the decision to stay on the field so he didn't lose the battle. But when the British left, this is technically a drawn battle, but his staff members, led by, of all people, Colonel Alexander Hamilton, who was not his chief of staff. I gave a lecture on that. He's there because he's a lawyer, he's smart, he writes well, and he knows French and communicates pretty well with Lafayette, who's French. He wrote up the report on the battle like we won, and that's how it got to the newspapers. And what's interesting, as you look at the different reports of the battle, in each of the reports, there's more British casualties and less American. And as I tell my history students, it's not so much a matter of what happened, it's what people think happened. And because we didn't lose, and we were so hungry for a victory, even though we had just got Philadelphia back, and even though we won Saratoga the year before, the newspapers all treated it as a victory. And in that regard, helps make Monmouth a turning point of the war. Now, I just gave a series of lectures on turning points. Yes, Saratoga is important because we captured the British Army, and it brought in formal French participation in the war. But the psychological turning point of the war is really Monmouth, because we fought them in a full battle and didn't lose. Washington kept his job. And the British decided, rather than trying to keep the war going, because the British war strategy just had not been good. Their first plan was to capture Boston and punish him for the Tea Party. Didn't work. American troops came. Henry Knox brought all the cannons from Ticonderoga, and we chased them out. The second plan was to cut off the northern colonies. That didn't work when Burgoyne got captured at Saratoga. Third plan was, let's capture Philadelphia, their capital, they'll surely give up. Except the dumb Americans just retired to York, Pennsylvania. So they went back to New York to reconfigure again, and their fourth plan is to go south and capture the American South. Now that sort of made sense because they do capture much of the American South. But the problem is the British just do not have enough troops, even with the help of the German mercenaries, to win the war. They had trouble holding more than 2 cities at the same time. Boston and New York and Philadelphia, New York and Savannah. America is a lot bigger than Scotland and England. And once this became a world war, they decided they would rather hold on to India and the Spice Islands and wherever else they had possessions, that America really wasn't worth it. And it's just interesting that the war with America cost them so much money that they finally had to give up fighting. The other side of that is that it cost the French so much money to help us win the war. And it's very odd that a Catholic monarchy is helping a Protestant democracy, America, win a war, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, talked to Roosevelt and Stalin in World War II, that the French spent so much money on the war that it caused the French Revolution, where you end up with Napoleon, and then the English go broke again fighting Napoleon. So it's tied in with a lot of European politics. But Monmouth is important because we didn't lose. Washington kept its job. The British changed their war strategy, but it didn't work. Because when they started conquering all the South, they got themselves up to Virginia. They had trouble with Virginia. Actually, Lafayette was up there with a good command, that they withdrew to Yorktown to get picked up by the British fleet and taken back to New York. But the situation was the French showed up with a fleet. Now be aware that the French had not defeated the British in a naval battle in 100 years. And at the Battle of Virginia Capes, they actually won. And because the French Navy beat the British Navy at Virginia Capes, they couldn't evacuate the British Army out of Yorktown, and Cornwallis had to surrender. And by then the British had enough of it. And here we are. And if we had lost the war, we'd still be part of the British Commonwealth and speaking English. Oh, we do speak English. That's a joke. Okay, so I went a little overboard on talking about causes of the war. I do have a long quote here from a private Ralph Schenck of the 4th Huntington Militia, but actually I ran this in one of the newsletters, and the newsletters are all on our excellent website, friendsofmonmouth.org, so I'll spare you to read that. So I've used up my hour exactly. See, I'm a school teacher. I used up my hour exactly. I didn't hear the bell. Be glad to entertain questions or speak to the individuals.
I got a question about the New Jersey militia. Was service conscripted or were they voluntary?
Conscripted. You were required to sign up for the militia. You'd show up and get fined. They have these militia lists and they had Civil War days. And if your company got called, you had to go for a month.
Gotcha.
Okay, Jim.
She's amazing. She keeps coming over here like her best life. Two things for you. Monmouth militia, correct?
Yes.
Monmouth militia here. I think I gave you a copy of my fifth great grandmother's application for her hubby's pension, Moses Mount. And in it, she talks about him being a courier for Washington. Do we know anything about that? Is that ever been?
That's not been pushed, and one of the monographs I'd like to see done is what militia units were here, who did what, and take accounts like this and the fellow that I got the diary from Essex County on to build a one weakness of Washington's staff structure is they don't have couriers. They don't use their mounted troops or cavalry, like even in Civil War days for scouting. And he will end up using his staff members as couriers. This will result in General von Steuben, when he was out scouting, carried messages, almost got captured.
Yeah.
Hamilton had his horse shot from under him and had to leave the battle. And couriers are important, especially as with your ancestor, local ones that know the roads. And I wish I had more examples of that, and that needs to be written up, and I thank you for supplying that.
Yeah. Find a copy of that, give that to you.
Yeah, if you give it to me again, I'll make sure the park has a copy of it if they don't already. Because, again, you can understand the importance of the home field advantage and that the generals are telling Lee where to be. But if you're Lee or Washington, you need to get a message to General Wayne, who's at Foreman's Mills. Who's going to know where that is except the guys that live here? And they were good couriers.
I would add that Washington seemed to have a better grasp on how to delegate near the end, because that's when he sends Greene south to go take on the battle with Cowpens, with Daniel Morgan, and then Utah Springs, and then finally go for the courthouse. It's Greene's ability.
Now Washington may not have been the best general in the world, just like Eisenhower. Eisenhower was an organizer and could work with people and assign people, and he was trusted and reliable. So I relate them. Usually, generals don't make good presidents. Washington had so much on his plate because the cabinet wasn't there. He was beware of establishing political parties. Eisenhower was an okay president for that time, but there are other cases of Civil War generals doing a terrible job because they can organize. It's a good point. Okay, any other questions? Yes, over here.
Was Scotch Willie Maxwell named because he was Scots-Irish?
I believe so. He's known as Scots Willie, and he was born over in Ireland. I didn't look and see where the exact town was, but yes, but I would believe so. Now, I could be proven wrong with that. I'll have to check on internet. Nolan, I didn't see we're here in the back. But I think so. But he's definitely known as Scots Willie. Okay, question? Yes.
Yeah, my ancestor was with the Middletown and the Monmouth militia.
Yes.
So that's I don't see that the Monmouth militia on the map.
Because the Monmouth militia. Let me look back at my notes.
And you would think since they was we were in Monmouth.
Yeah. Try me a moment here. The Monmouth militia was with Morgan down at the Burger King.
Down
Route 9, yeah. South of town, yeah.
South.
There were 200 Monmouth and Burlington militia with Morgan.
Whether he's actually,
in that group, yeah.
I don't know. At least it's getting closer. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Yes.
When Lee went on his attack, how far did he get across Route 9?
A ways, and like with Gettysburg, the battle was waged in the town. There was a cannon battery where the monument is in town. His lead troops in the center did cross that morass, which is where Veterans Park is. Lafayette's advance on the right wing came up about as far as the courthouse, and Wayne's attack went about half a mile beyond the morass, almost to the edge of Lake Toponimus.
Yeah.
So about a third of his troops went east of what we call the East Morass, which is where Veterans Park was. Most of the rest of them were in the area where the modern courthouse is. And when we get the markers set up, we'll be able to put colorful maps up and show exactly. There were a lot of British troops in that town the night before, and when they withdrew, there were a lot. There were 3,000 American troops in the town for about an hour before they had to withdraw. Okay, anything else? Okay, I'm going to go reopen the gift shop, unless my assistant is here on time. Otherwise, thank you all for coming out. I enjoyed it.